Hello, you wayward sinners. This is Mix Awesome Manatee, and welcome to my Hazbin Hotel Season 1 review. It would be a disservice to not cover this subject matter. I'm unashamed. I love this cartoon. I love this animation. I've been following it since 2019, and I thought, why not review it? Because while I love it to death, it has a slew of mixed reviews, some from legitimate sources and others from the terminally online. So, for those of you that don't know, for those of you that are still under a rock or off the internet, Hazbin Hotel is a comedy musical that takes place in hell. And I'll just let Alistair explain the rest.
Hello there, you wayward sinner. Do you like blood, violence, and depravity of a sexual nature? Of course you do. That's why you're in hell. But what would you say if I told you there was a place to stay that had none of that? Welcome to the Hazbin Hotel, a misguided path to redemption. Founded 5 days ago by Lucifer's delusional daughter, Charlotte Morningstar. Come place your fate in her inexperienced hands as she tries to work through her daddy issues by fixing you.
And more than just that, hell endures a very murderous invasion by angels every year led by Adam, the first man. With nobody having faith in Charlie Morningstar's project, it is up to her and her crew to convince heaven and hell that sinners can indeed be redeemed. But things go awry as heaven is determined to enforce the status quo, by force and violence if necessary. It's pretty ambitious to tell such a vast story within 8 episodes, and the question is, were they able to do so? Well, let's break it down by episode to see how it went. Episode 1, Overture. A soft continuation of the plot, we start off with a storybook presentation of Hell's lore as told by Charlie. It explains the extermination and Charlie's attempts to dissuade Adam from this status quo. She is not successful and people's lack of faith in her is expressed through song. Something I do like about the songs within this episode is how they represent two opposite sides, goals and factions. Here you have Charlie, ecstatic about the mere opportunity of talking to one of the angels, which she interpreted as a chance to push her plan forth. On the B-plot, you have Vaggie, who is attempting to remake a commercial that's more acceptable to the reputation of the hotel. In this way, it softly reintroduces the ensemble we'll be following throughout the season. Then with the big twist, we find out that the reason the angels are shortening their extermination to every 6 months is not just because Adam's a dick, even though it wouldn't be surprising if that was a factor. No, it turns out that they're doing so as in retaliation to one of the demons killing their own. They're not doing it immediately because that would risk the demons catching on, which is a huge risk. Okay, but little nitpick here, and again, I love this show, so... But, why would they just not recover the body? They still have the head, they can just bring the body back so the other demons don't catch on. I mean, just leaving it out there is, creates a little bit of complications. Perhaps the drone recovered the body, I really don't know. But regardless of that tiny little nitpick, overall, pretty solid plot, and it perfectly set up the overarching conflict of the entire season. Episode 2, Radio Killed the Video Star. This is where we're introduced to the V's. Now to some, this may be one of the complaints that we focus on, that there are too many characters, that the focus is too split and divisive. I would say for this episode, I disagree on this. The V's are softly introduced as a threat on top of having one of the best songs, but this was key to introducing Serpentius, another member of the ensemble. It's a sharply written episode that introduces more of what's to come in the second season, but the primary reason for this episode was to mainly introduce Serpentius. I think this is an excellent use of other villains. The first song was to introduce who Vox is and Alistair's relation to him, so right away we're introduced to the motivations as to why they would send in a spy. No mystery box necessary. But not only that, it introduced what Charlie was trying to do and the shortcomings of her methods. Overall, pretty solid episode, pretty pivotal episode, great songs, and I really don't have too many complaints about it. It is perfect as is. Episode 3, Scrambled Eggs. This episode is where I do complain. It introduces another aspect to breathe more life into the setting and to softly introduce Carmilla. It also reintroduced the fact that one of the angels was killed and where the head of the angel ended up. On the B-plot, Charlie entrusted Vaggie with running trust exercises with the guests, and in my opinion, that should have been the meat of the episode. The reason we are watching Hazbin Hotel is to see more of the hotel and what it's trying to do. I don't mind breathing a little life into the setting, but we also did that in the prior episode, and we're also talking about a TV show for Amazon Prime, not J.R.R. Tolkien. We've seen what happens when that studio tried that. We've already implied that Hell has many factions through the prior episode. It wasn't necessary to include this episode on top of the other one. I wouldn't mind a few scenes with Alistair heading up with the Egg Boys, but I would probably cut it off right before he meets Zestial. I don't see enough of Vaggie's struggles. She could have used so much characterization along with the clashing of personalities that would come with Vaggie's strong-willed determination clashing against Angel, Husk, and Serpentius, and Vaggie's lack of communication that she has with Charlie when going through her own struggles. I would like to see more meat to this, so that when Charlie and Vaggie express their affection, it's through more than just one song and a few scenes. This is probably the most malnourished aspect of the episode. It's shown that Vaggie and Charlie are a couple, fuck the homophobes. I want to see more sapphic representation. The homophobic watchers of the show are in denial and the minority. Let's not cater to their sensibilities. I'm not saying that's what affected the show, but let's not pull a Disney and do soft punches. These are two women in love. On top of that, I did feel feeling in the reveal and you didn't know, but I think it would hit so much harder if there was more of a contrast between Vaggie and Charlie having softer, tender moments, and then to contrast it with the betrayal. Though I did feel for Charlie because she's a likable character, there really wasn't much in the scenes presented. Overall, episode 3, I think it focuses too much on world lore, which really hurts to say because as a tabletop RPG player, I love world lore, especially this world's lore, but again, we already got some of that in the prior episode. I want to see more of characterization than the setting presentation. At this point, this is a trigger warning for episode 4 on. I will put in a timestamp for skipping episode 4 because episode 4 has some sensitive topics that may or may not trigger people. This is your warning. Episode 4, Masquerade. This one is a solid episode that gives more of what I was asking for in the prior episode. We get more dives into who Angel Dust is and his current situation. We see how a demon's life outside the hotel may affect what's going on inside the hotel. We see Charlie trying to Leslie Knope her way onto Valentino's soundstage, and just how depraved Valentino truly is. We get the substance of the music video Addicted, and it plays out on the screen on a more fully fleshed out episode. For some viewers, this ends up being too sensitive of an episode that displays an explicit view of how abuse occurs. This isn't a slight against them. Some people struggle with trauma of an abusive nature, and it's a callous expectation for them to get over it. My argument for this episode is that it isn't necessarily for victims as much as it's for people unfamiliar with the nature of abuse. Many people still ask the question, why do you stay with him? While meaning well, it ignores and inadvertently invalidates the feelings of the victim. Rather than consider how that person might feel or how they're adapting to the situation, it completely ignores the internal processes in favor of what is seen. It takes the circumstances of people who say, if that were me, I wouldn't let them talk to me that way, and it really paints a picture for them. Many times, it just really isn't that easy. In order for Angel to sign a contract with Valentino, there had to be an implicit trust at the beginning of their relationship. All we see is the byproduct. Another show, Hell of a Boss, explores this concept through Mammon and Fizzarali. Fizzarali is surrounded by characters who keep saying, if that were me, I wouldn't let him talk to me that way. But does that really help? No, it pushes him further because it invalidates what Fizzarali feels, what his priorities are. It's not a slight against Blitz or Ozzy, they both mean well, but in the end, Ozzy is able to communicate and get to the heart of the matter by just simply asking how Fizzarali feels about this. Why does he feel so strongly about what he's expressing? Why does he feel it's so important? These are important questions to ask when somebody is enduring abuse because it doesn't invalidate them. It's actually showing that you have concern for where their priorities lie instead of just telling them their priorities are stupid. Again, you're not meaning to do that directly. It's just brain no work good sometimes. Again, we do like to imagine ourselves as Twisted Sister when in fact we will continue to take it if circumstances are set in such a way that lowers our guard. And that's the key. Both Angel and Fizzarali feel a comfort in the abuse because it's familiar. It's something they can predict. It's scary to go into anything else. It's a shock for the brain to go into a place that's unpredictable. In other words, a punch to the face is easier to manage when you can see it coming. The ones you don't see is what scares them most. Anyway, back to Hazbin. Angel and Husk have a bit of a conflict, where Husk is growing tired of Angel's advancements. Some psychologists, I'll recommend them here, have broken down the victims that sometimes take on a more sexualized approach as a means of taking control, especially when they're the victims of that kind of abuse. Rather than be on the receiving end of that abuse, they're able to take on a more dominant role and take control that they're never granted when in the hands of their abuser. But Husk is growing weary of having his boundaries violated. He clearly asserted his boundaries several times over, so the time for polite decline has run its course, so Husk rejects him outright. So, why is Angel upset? It is out of the norm. Angel outlines it. People normally trip over themselves and do anything and everything to get a piece of him. And with Husk telling him no, that probably freaked him out. Nobody ever tells him no. On top of that, the catharsis that Angel felt when coming on the people would run its course, albeit in a toxic manner. Husk was telling him, no, you will not be doing that to me. And if somebody was telling Angel no, could it be possible that Angel was adopting the habits of his abuser? It's unclear whether or not this level of introspection is what ran through Angel's head. Either way, something really messed with his head. Then we get a song in contrast to Poison. Basically, Husk saying that he's in a similar circumstance and that it's a relief that somebody could relate to him. Though Husk may not be sexually exploited, we find out in a later episode that there is a threat of force if Husk were to disobey his abuser, which does lead me to the next episode. Overall, really good episode. Some people have complaints about it because it's a little too explicit with it. And again, don't shame people for that. Some people have different levels of sensitivity when it comes to situations, especially when they're coming off fresh off the situations. But even if they're not fresh off the situations, even if it happened years ago, some people just will not get over their trauma in all reality. So I will say this episode is not for everyone, but it's mainly for people who haven't endured abuse to get them to understand why people might stay in situations. Episode 5, Dad Beat Dad. Charlie is running out of time and trying to come up with ways on how to redeem people within the time span. It doesn't bode well. Therefore, Charlie must flex her connections by calling Lucifer, the one who set her up that connection through heaven in the first place. He already did so through Adam. However, as Charlie figures out, Adam is not the only angel. Surely they all can't be terrible. This also sets up one of the best rivalries besides Vox and Alistair, where Vox and Alistair is a case of, notice me senpai, Lucifer is actually a credible threat to Alistair's hold in the hotel. Number 1, because it's Lucifer, king of hell. He is king for a reason. But number 2, Lucifer and Charlie are related by blood, and they don't seem to have bad blood. Well, maybe a little bad blood with one another, but it doesn't seem to be strong enough for them to never talk to each other. However, their estranged nature does give Alistair an opportunity to create a rift between Charlie and her father, thus prompting a counter song to Lucifer's bombastic claims of delivering the world to her. If he is as influential as he says he is, and as willing as he says, where was he for the past 7 years? Which is a legitimate question that sends Lucifer into a duel with Alistair. The B-plot is that Mimsy shows up and Husk, having history, knows that she's trouble. Trying to warn Alistair, Alistair does not take it well. Assuming that he knows best, he patronizes Husk, which Husk does not appreciate. However, when Husk mumbles something about Alistair's own situation with a leash, his ego takes hold and threatens to tear Husk asunder if he dares question him again. As much as I do love Alistair, he's really not that far out from Valentino. I said what I said, Alistair is also an abusive asshole and clearly not somebody to be trusted. Abusers are often people that try to separate victims from their support system. Thus, my theory is that Alistair is trying to exploit a rift between Charlie and her father so that he can manipulate Charlie into his whims. But he smiles at more than anything, but then let me remind you on what he says about smiling.
Just because you see a smile, don't think you know what's going on underneath. A smile is a valuable tool, my dear. It inspires your friends, keeps your enemies guessing, and ensures that no matter what comes your way, you're the one in control.
Episode 6, Welcome to Heaven. A pretty solid episode that showcases Heaven and one of my favorite characters throughout the show, Emily. A sentient squishmallow that can barely contain the excitement of showing others to heaven, in contrast to Sarah, who's more reserved and somewhat apprehensive of showing Charlie around. However, she needs to play a political game caused by Adam's reckless dismissal and their announcement of genocide prime. The B-plot is cleverly used to contrast Hell's denizens and is a nod to the pilot where Charlie was declaring their progress made through angel dust. The contrast here is that despite being in a nightclub, a magnet of sinful behavior, angel dust is actually showing progress. The C-plot is that Adam is trying to manipulate Vaggie into supporting him above Charlie's plan by blackmailing her with her backstory. The fact that she used to be an angel who killed thousands of sinners, but also revealed that she was put into hell for sparing a sinner, which was unacceptable to Lude. I think the reveal in You Didn't Know would hit harder if we got more establishment of Charlie and Vaggie's relationship so that there's a contrast between their softer moments and that ultimate betrayal. Overall, pretty solid episode. The B-plot was used excellently to demonstrate Charlie's point and to prove that actually she knows what she's talking about. I think this is probably the most clever juggling of plots. Episode 7. Hello, Rosie. Charlie is upset after the reveal that Vaggie was an angel. She wasn't upset that she was an angel, but the fact that Vaggie betrayed her trust. Again, I know I keep repeating this point. If we got more of the relationship at the beginning, this would hit harder. But because Charlie is a likable character, a lot of people do feel for her. But we do have to rely on implicit experience as opposed to explicit clues, which may or may not limit audience retention. But there's no time to grieve. Charlie does have to win over Cannibal Town, and we probably get one of the best supporting characters of the show. I fucking love Rosie. It is to be noted that much of the Tim Burton influences really show in this part of the show. In the B-plot, Vaggie has to win over Carmilla Carmine. It was revealed through one of the Egg Boys, and this would create more suspense and mystery. But again, if we didn't get episode 3, I would love to have a little mystery on if the Egg Boys, what they said was actually legit, or if it was just more crazy shit. We already know from the first episode that an angel did die, but how would this Egg Boy find out? We know by episode 3, but I would prefer the mystery to actually be covering it there. This would have kept people on the edge. Is the intelligence valid? Was Carmilla the right person to ask? Then it'd be revealed that she was the one that killed the angel, and then you get the song of Carmilla singing about fighting for love, which honestly, I do love the message of this song, and I wouldn't do it any differently. I would probably just structure the reveal a little differently so that Vaggie actually has to fight more to get the information instead of going, okay, I'll give it to you. I wish there was more of a carrot and stick play there. Because the way this scene was set up was like an indirect Kung Fu Master sort of way. She toys with her because she knows what Vaggie is. And Charlie, in contrast, Charlie had a lot to overcome. So, again, my complaint about Vaggie's plot in this episode is that really lack of conflict. Some might say that Carmilla was conflicting with Vaggie externally by not revealing the information to her. In my opinion, it's pretty weak. I am not a big fan of lore dumps. If it's like incorporated naturally, then that's one thing. But it's kind of told to her at the beginning, so it's like, why are we even going through the song? There's no real reason to go through it because Vaggie knows. She knows that the weapons are... anyway. At the end, Charlie and Vaggie make up, and they're getting ready for the conflict to come. Episode 8. the show must go on. Solid episode, I really have no complaints about this. Vaggie and Charlie give us a sapphic representation that many have asked for. Husk and Angel imply a growing affection between the two. Serpentius is awkward as all hell, and one thing I really love is the implied story in the background. Charlie encouraging Serpentius in the background to confess his feelings for Cherry Bomb. Alistair is revealed not to be a total complete sociopath, along with Nifty. And then we get the main battle, and I'm pretty happy with it. There are some that say, but Lucifer was an easy vox machina. It isn't, and here's why. There's an agreement between heaven and hell not to mess with the Hellborn, just the sinners. When Adam went back in his promise and attempted to take out a Hellborn, Charlie, especially considering the fact that this is Lucifer's daughter, why would Lucifer not intervene? On top of that, Charlie is not a fighter, and this was very clear from the get-go. You could probably already see it, but even in her battle get-up, she had a shield. Her demeanor in apologizing for fighting, and even her reaction after the battle, she was not built for war. A reason why Adam was able to overpower her is because she's just not accustomed to this, despite being raised in hell, with Vaggie preoccupied by loot and the rest of the hotel preoccupied by the angels. It was appropriate. Oh, and Alistair getting his ass handed to him. It was appropriate for Lucifer to step in. It was all pretty reasonable. I really have no complaints about it at all. It was a story arc for him as well. But before, he struggled with self-doubt. He felt like he had to have a whole entire musical number just to impress his daughter, even though she already loves him as he is, and he feels like he needs to prove that he's worthy of being loved. Now, because he has put that weight off his shoulders, he is allowing himself to be more present in her life, full bravado and all. I also appreciate how powerful Alistair is, but it's still unpredictable because Adam is the first man, so that implies that he's going to have power, and if he's leading this extermination every year, that implies that he's been powerful for a number of years, and he's had time to hone his skills. Basically, Alistair versus Adam was a level versus skill issue. It didn't matter how skilled Alistair was, it just did not make up for the sheer raw power that Adam could deliver. It was important to put Alistair in a more vulnerable state after 2 episodes ago, where he outclassed much of hell. It gives an ebb and flow necessary for a dynamic story. It's not bad to telegraph what's going to happen, but it needs to be inspired by the story itself. As in the cases with movies like Rebel Moon that just retell Star Wars in an edgier coat of paint, it didn't really say anything new as opposed to Hazbin Hotel, where one may find it difficult to compare it to any other story. It develops its own story beats while taking inspiration, but not plagiarizing from others. My personal overall take of this show, I love this thing. It's not without its flaws, but I have faith that it'll be better in the second time around. And just because you love how Hazbin Hotel turned out doesn't mean that you have less love for the pilot. I have a lot of love for the pilot. I wouldn't have gotten into Angel Must as much as I did if it wasn't for Michael Kovac's performance. I wouldn't have been invested if it wasn't for Edward Bosco or Black Griffin's portrayal of Alistair. Would I like to see them interact in a fully fledged show? Yeah. I would also like to see Mark Hamill, Harrison Ford, and Carrie Fisher have a proper reunion in the new Star Wars trilogy, but before the unthinkable happened. But what's sitting here and lamenting about what could have been going to do for me? I love every single iteration of this show, and realistically, pilots change all the time. The regular show's pilot was drastically different from what we got. Family Guy was way rougher than what we got in its debut. The Simpsons didn't start off as a fully fledged show, yet they evolved with their conditions. So, do I recommend this show? If you're 18 and up. It's not a kid's show, y'all. Satanic Panic is a thing of the 80s, let's keep it there. But if you're not sensitive to adverse subject matters or strong language, then this show could be something for you. However, if you have Virgin Emily ears, you just might want to run the other way. But, what do you guys think? Thank you for watching. This is Mix Awesome Manatee. Thank you, sinners.